Oh, son of a...
What? That was great, except for the fact that I splashed myself in the eye. Glasses. Don't look at my tummy. I'm hideous.
Everyone look at his tummy.
Not my tummy. Welcome to Movie Boners, everybody.
Welcome, everyone.
Thank you for joining us again.
What are you doing? The dog's not there.
I don't have a dog in here.
Welcome to the show, everyone.
It's off to a great start so far.
Yeah, it is.
What beer do you have this week, my good man?
Yeah, that one's all right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They can't all be winners.
It's true. It's not bad. It's definitely the weakest beer that I've had on our show.
Oh,
My
wow.
coworkers would be able to tolerate this one.
Okay.
Who, by the way, did listen to the blip about me shit talking their beer drinking ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, that became a good laugh.
Good.
Bunch of bitches.
And it continues.
Anyways, this is called Bad Outta Hells.
Oh.
It's a German-style lager brewed in San Antonio from Freetail. It's not bad. It's an easy drinking beer. It's a hot day kind of beer, and it's a hot day.
Okay, fair enough. I'm drinking from Horse and Dragon Brewery here in Fort Collins, Colorado. I originally thought this said whistleblower, but it doesn't. It says whistle blast.
Oh, all right.
And so I thought it would be appropriate.
Blower from blast is beyond.
Well,
me.
you know, I saw the word whistle and then I stopped reading entirely.
That
But
happens.
it's a honey brown ale, and it's pretty good, as everything from Horse and Dragon is.
Yeah, I kind of miss Horse and Dragon. Man, that place is good.
Yeah. Hopefully they get big enough to distribute down to Texas way. That would be cool.
Yeah, that would be nice.
So,
I could go for some Sad Panda. Oh my god!
yeah, Sad Panda is literally the best beer ever.
It's so good.
Yeah. So yeah, check out Horse and Dragon if you can find them wherever you live.
Yep. Yeah.
All
right.
So this week's episode is a little bit off the rails, as you can tell already. There are no rails. This is like the Matrix. There is no spoon. Just we have basically no structure.
That's fitting, considering, you know, with this style of filmmaking, you are kind of forced to go with the flow. It's going to be a little chaotic. No rails. You can start.
The story may not be what you think it's going to be by the time you finish.
Right. So I think that's fitting.
Okay. We made it work. Yeah. So this week we're going to talk about documentaries and documentary filmmaking, and which I'm excited about. I think it's a really cool thing. I watch a good amount of documentaries. I don't watch them often because it does feel a little bit like homework a lot of the time. But I mean, there are some very serious, very sad documentaries that you have to be in the right state of mind to watch. But in general, I think the concept of documentary filmmaking is really cool and really important. I think a lot of great journalists make some great documentaries, and just that real life nonfiction genre is interesting.
Right. Unless the documentary is very biased, or documentarian is very biased, in which case every documentary they make is super preachy. Berate you over the head with their opinion. Any other opinion is wrong. That guy sucks.
I think it's a lot of responsibility to be a documentary filmmaker, because it's very easy to manipulate people and to lead them down a path based on the things that you're showing them and the things you're telling them. They will believe it and not generally think about all of the context that's missing, or all of the other things that they didn't show, that chose not to show, or the things that they cut together to make it look like it was a certain way and it wasn't. You can easily mislead people if you're not careful. So my favorite kinds of documentaries tend to be the ones that either someone goes into it having no idea what it is and they just are learning along with the audience, and then they kind of just tell their story of learning this thing, or the filmmaker that will go into a very controversial subject and show both sides pretty evenly. So they'll show this group of people who are perceived to be total shitbags or are total shitbags. This is what they believe, why they believe it. And then this is the rest of society, why they believe that they suck and all that stuff. But they keep an impartial balance. That's, I think, the key is from the filmmaker's perspective, they're not manipulating things.
Especially with like the heavier hitting subject matter, I kind of feel like it's a duty for the documentarian to remain unbiased, to remain middle ground. Kind of, to me, they should be the example of how the news and media was supposed to be or used to be, where it's, here are the facts, not even trying to manipulate, a swing in thought, but just showing everything for what it is. I feel like documentaries work best when they're really raw, when there's not a lot of polishing to it. Those are the ones that really get to me. Now, granted, I do find myself with a lot of documentaries not going towards all the time super heavy hitting subject matter. As a viewer, I will try to, well, not even try, but I will like gravitate towards the stuff that I'm like, I feel close to or feel connected to. So as a viewer, I kind of feel I should probably be breaking that habit with some of the stuff. But, when you're looking up documentaries to watch that could be interesting, you're like, do I want to watch one that's going to crush my soul, crush my spirit, or watch something that might just show me a different side of something that I really enjoy, whether it's good or bad?
Yeah. And I think that's the interesting thing. There's so many different topics out there that it's easy to find things that cater to your personal tastes and interests. Like if you like wrestling, there's a lot of wrestling documentaries. If you like food, there's a lot of food documentaries, like that kind of thing.
Which I've watched plenty of food documentaries over the years. I did watch a wrestling documentary just for you this last week.
I can't wait to hear which one.
This has been kind of fun. I haven't watched, well, no, that's a lie. I watched one actual movie in the last week. Everything else that I've been watching is all documentaries.
Nice.
So it's been a little overload. By the way, I went and saw Shang-Chi, Legend of the Ten Rings, to see where the new phase of MCU kicks off. I'll wait to actually dive into that until you watch it, and then we'll do a little review episode.
Okay.
But
I'm interested to watch it.
Movie.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what the next phase is like. I think it's an interesting one to start with. We talked about in our Marvel episode how the 10 rings have make a couple of small appearances that you don't really know. Hey, that's going to come back. I also think it's interesting to see where it's going to go because I've been reading about the whole Scarlett Johansson Disney fiasco and
right.
all of the actors and Russo brothers are like supporting her. And then Disney's like, well, maybe you won't direct Russo brothers. Maybe you won't direct any more Marvel movies. And so it's like, is this like going to be the destruction of Disney's like momentum that they've got going on? It's very weird.
It's interesting. Maybe someone should document it. Hey,
all right. I like it. Yeah. I like the like the behind the scenes movie documentaries. That's like one subgenre of documentary. I like those a lot. And just to be able to see how something got made, the struggles of the filmmakers making it, the actors making it, just the all the hurdles in the production process. I always find those things kind of interesting.
Yeah, I always find myself wishing that like making of special features or you know special segments on HBO or whatever. I always find myself wishing they were always longer than an hour. But at the same time, kind of understanding why it doesn't need to be longer than an hour, I just always find myself kind of in that weird conflicting area of, no, I want to watch more, but I get why you're not showing us more. And the problem,
Yeah,
but you got to make sure you're not watching the making ofs until after you have watched like the TV series or the movie, because 9 out of 10 times during the making of, you're going to get like a massive spoiler, you know?
Yeah.
Like you're gonna
yeah, they just kind of take it for granted that you've seen everything about the movie by then.
Right. So they can show whatever they want.
There's not a lot of, I feel like there's not as many long form movie making documentaries these days, partly probably because they just throw all that content on the DVDs, special features, and Blu-ray special features. But there are some really cool ones. There's a really long one about, I was just looking at it now. I have to scroll back up. I had a little brain fart there. Blade Runner, Dangerous Days, the making of Blade Runner documentary. And that's really interesting. And it's about, obviously, Harrison Ford getting involved, and all he's really been known for is Star Wars at that point. And like, oh, you're into sci-fi movies. Like, do you want to be in another sci-fi movie? But Blade Runner is such a different kind of movie. And really, Scott is such an interesting director and filmmaker that I like that kind of thing. I think it's cool.
Yeah. I think I just lost the word. One of the better making of features or quick little documentary things, you got to watch the making of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. All of those, just the scope and the attention to detail, the mentality of approaching that kind of scale, that document, like all of their making ofs, it's mind blowing, especially if you're a huge fan or very interested in all the aspects of filmmaking that, you know, you have to make a 2 to 3 hour movie. There's a lot more to it than just, you know, the clapboard and action and cut. There's the amount of crew members that has to go into this stuff is unreal. But the Lord of the Rings, all of the making ofs for that's the kind of stuff, it'll suck you in. It's just, it's so beautiful. It's huge. And it's really cool seeing like the passion behind everyone for that undertaking. So that's a really cool making of.
Yeah. It has a lot of, I mean, obviously there's a ton of detail, not just in J.R.R. Tolkien's writing, but I think the way Peter Jackson approached it is super detailed. And I think it's interesting that he took on such a massive project not that long into his film career. He didn't have that many major credits under his belt. By the time he had to like herd all these cats, is kind of a crazy thing.
I lost it. Go ahead.
One of my favorite documentaries that's kind of about film and filmmaking, but also mostly not at all about that, is the documentary Room 237 about The Shining and Stanley Kubrick. And people know it or like remember it because the basic premise of it is a lot of different people talk about how The Shining has impacted them and what they experienced watching it and what they experienced about Kubrick in general. But my favorite part is they talk about all of the little hidden messages that Kubrick tends to put, or people interpret him putting into his movies, whether he does intentionally or not.
I'm one that weighs heavily on the allegedly puts in there. But yeah, with like the whole Apollo, the moon landing, all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's funny to see. I can't help but think that he actually did a lot of it just to like kind of keep the embers going of all the little talk of conspiracy. If
it was me, if it was me and I was famous and I heard that there were rumors about me helping produce footage of the moon landing, in my next movie, I would definitely put in like little clues to fuck with people and be like, hey, little kid, wear the sweater. It'd be hilarious. Like an inside joke, you know?
I wouldn't be able to help myself, but like we're going to mess with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
What better way to play a huge prank than on millions of people over time? Not just like your first bit, but the rumors of him filming the moon landing have been going on for so long that you still hear about it now. Yeah, that's it's freaking Stanley Kubrick. Obviously, we can't ask him, and he never came out and like confirmed or denied anything. He was very I plead the fifth kind of mentality with all of it.
Yeah. Which is simultaneously what you would do if you were involved and what you would do if you wanted to keep the joke going. Like I love that people interpret that movie and the messages in it as not that he's just playing a prank on people, but that he is racked with guilt and wants to like let out the secret in like a non-obvious way. I like that's not the obvious way that you would think that someone would do something, but that's the way that they've latched onto it, which is hilarious. Which part of me seriously, going back to my conspiracy tendencies, seriously believes we didn't land on the moon the first time. I think we eventually did go to the moon, but I think that the pressure of we're getting into it. The pressure of the space race and the time frame they had was not enough, so they just needed to fake it the first time to get by time, and then after that we went later because we could. That's my opinion. Not what this episode's about. Let's move on. Can't see it, but that's just shaking his head.
People listening to the audio can't see me shaking my head in judgment, but I am.
Anyway, Room 237. It's mostly not about that. It's mostly about everything else and the intricate way that he blocked the scenes and took you through the hallways, and the way that the hotel doesn't make any sense how it's actually laid out. It's like literally designed to confuse you. Yeah, it's fascinating, and Kubrick's filmmaking is fascinating. They touch on more things than just The Shining, but it's a really interesting one, I think.
Yeah,
Room 237.
I did one of the ones that I watched this last week, just on the same topic of documentaries about film or film related kind of stuff. Which, real quick, go on Hulu. They have so many freaking documentaries on there for everything. I honestly think it gave Netflix and HBO a huge run for their money. Hulu's documentaries just felt extensive. So check that out. But one that I watched was a bit awkward, but it was an interesting concept to me just because of how hot of a topic it has always been and will always be. There's a documentary called Skin, and it's all about nudity in films.
Okay.
So, and kind of like the social impact on it. They have a lot of
rating system around it.
Yeah, the rating system, actresses, kind of opinions on it. Both they had actresses that were all for it, felt it was empowering, and then they had actresses who felt the exact opposite, where it was they felt kind of shamed into doing it or guilted into doing it.
Exploited, maybe.
Yeah, you learn a lot about kind of the process of writing the contracts out for the actors and actresses, and all the little things and how extensive it gets. It was really interesting. It's a long one, which took me off guard. I was like, this is still going. Oh my God.
It's amazing.
But it was interesting. Obviously, there is a ton of nudity in this documentary. But it was still a very interesting one because as big of a fan of film that I am, I had never really realized or learned they've been putting nudity into film since film started, which is crazy.
As long as they've been putting people into film. Yeah.
Right. There's been nudity. And I honestly didn't quite realize that until I'm watching this, and they show like old early silent film or like the very early first moving pictures, and there's nudity. And I guess the rule back then was as long as there's no movement, then it's not offensive. But as soon as like a woman would move, then it was like, oh no.
I actually could totally see that, because I was about to say, even before moving pictures, you had static pictures. You had paintings and sculptures and things that had nudity in them. And so I imagine, just off the top of my head, I imagine that was their logic. They're like, if it's still, it's like a painting and it's art. But if it moves, then it's like pornography and it's bad.
Right. And that was exactly the thought process. So it goes through like kind of how that thought or that approach changed, you know, kind of evolved or de-evolved depending on where you stand on nudity in film. But it was really interesting movie. Definitely shows a side of Hollywood we all know is there, but it brings it to light, especially because they made this one post Me Too movement, which made it even more kind of interesting to watch, because you do get some of the opinions post that movement, but some of them were not what I expected. So it's worth a watch. You just got to understand there's a lot of nudity in that one. Nudity in it.
If you're offended by it, don't watch this documentary called Skin about nudity.
Right.
It's probably what you get.
I mean, it was. I learned a lot of kind of that whole different side of it. It was very interesting.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I think that it tends to go several directions. I think that there's so many examples of it being handled well, where filmmakers are like nice and polite and conscientious, and the nudity does have to do with the story. It's a way of telling a clear and complete story. And then there are a lot of other examples of people being exploited or made uncomfortable or forced into it or manipulated, and it doesn't serve the story at all. It's just like kind of because you don't have anything else. You're like, people aren't going to watch this for the performance or the story or the action or the effects, but they'll watch it because there's boobs in it. So let's do that. And it's kind of cheap.
At one point, one of the actresses they're talking to does come out and says flat out, like, the studio called up the director and said, no, we want 5 scenes of nudity. We don't care where you put it. We don't care what the context is. Just make sure that we see the woman's breasts 5 times. Do with it what you want. And I was like, they said that, and immediately I was uncomfortable hearing that, because that is that it serves no purpose to the film. It serves no purpose to anything except some executive wants to get his rocks off. You know?
Yeah, and to put such a fine point on it, to quantify it at an exact number, it's like it feels so arbitrary. It's like, why not 6? Why not 4? What's the big deal? Well,
and I mean, yeah, what's the big deal? And then if it serves zero purpose, then what's like, why?
Yeah.
What's the purpose? And the only purpose I, as the viewer, could come up with was, well, some dude sitting in his suit and tie in his office is just like throwing around his power, or, you know, combined with, I want to get off. So it was, the documentary worked to make you uncomfortable, and it still left me trying to figure out, like, how do I actually feel about nudity in film? I'm still like, it's odd. It's interesting because it is a challenging one. So I do recommend that one if you're looking for like filmmaking based ones.
That sounds good. I think that that's a good topic and a good approach, that it's nuanced. There are times where it makes sense, and there are times where it feels weird. And I think that attaches to the audience, at least me as an audience member, who's like, I don't know how I feel about it in all cases, like being super general about it, but being more specific about it. This kind of thing feels weird. This kind of thing is fine. This kind of thing is natural. And you can definitely run the gambit. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. But filmmaking documentaries, they're always interesting, and you're always going to learn and see stuff about Hollywood that you're going to be like, I knew it. You're going to feel gross. You're going to be like, ugh, why would anyone want to do this? And then at the same time, they're showing you all of the other side of it that we do see, the glam side and like the positive sides of it. Not that the glam side is the positive, but you know what I mean? Like there's the
yeah, there is a positiveness to it.
Yeah, and you see that kind of stuff, and you're like, oh yeah, that's why people get into it. That's why. So really, and there's so many documentaries about the movies and specific films. Check them out. There's very interesting documentaries out there.
Yeah, one of my favorite ones is interesting and kind of, I guess, one of the things that you mentioned for the Skin documentary is the timing of it, that it was post Me Too movement, and that kind of informs how the story's told, what the story's about, that kind of thing. Timing is a big deal, I think, in documentaries, whether you're on the cutting edge of something that's happening or you're going back to talk about something that happened a long time ago and with new perspective, that timing kind of is a big factor. But I had an epiphany watching one of my documentaries that I like a lot this week, rewatching it again this week. And it's the one about George Lucas, The People versus George Lucas.
People versus George Lucas. Amazing documentary. Documentary.
It's so good. And it's about George Lucas in general, so not just Star Wars. Most of it's Star Wars, but they do talk a good amount about Indiana Jones and everything else that he's done. But the timing of it is also interesting, I think, because it's before Disney was involved and before the third wave or the last trilogy that we just had. So it's really just, here's this guy who made this thing in the 70s and 80s that everybody loved, that took the world by storm, who was a complete maniac and dictator about what the story should be, and completely tried to erase everybody's memory of it with these new versions, and how the fans reacted to that. And it's crazy. But my favorite part about it is how they don't show that much of the actual movies. They show like fan edits or fan reenactments, or like people acting them out with like toys or animation, like stop motion and drawings, and just people in their basement. And it just kind of really shows how massive Star Wars is and how much it took over the world. And people are super fans, and they feel like obligated to buy every piece of merchandise that he puts out, even though they hate him for it, and they hate how like he's the king of merchandising, but they still are like, oh, there's a new R2-D2 thing I have to get. And it's gets out of control.
That documentary, it's a challenging one, because it does like go through the fans' point of view versus Lucas's on the full story of Star Wars, not just the prequels, although that part is freaking hilarious to me when they really dive into episodes 1 through 3 of like how people responded to the prequel trilogy, and
how excited everybody was going into it,
and then just how devastating it was for everyone coming out of it. For the most part, for us, definitely. But it does challenge you a lot with should you resent or be mad at or hate George Lucas for what he did, or should we still be thankful that he even gave us something to be so passionate about? I thought that was, and through the course of the film, they really press a lot of that, and you're like, no, for me, when it ended, I was still very much like, no, I still don't like what he did. I still am not a fan, but that documentary is so well done, and it's so good. I love seeing the fan base, because it's funny, like seeing people right before episode 1 came out buying all the Jar Jar Binks merchandise, and all, because all the merchandise, they've been doing it for years, is already out before the film even releases, which even as a kid, I've always thought doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I feel like the film should release and then your merchandise should roll in, because you catch people off of the euphoria of watching it.
Right.
But I'm just some schmuck who thinks that way. The whole merchandising of it and the excitement, and then and then they show people's like response post watching episode 1 and all that. And it's so, man, I feel for those people, because I am those people, you know. It's such a good documentary. I remember being slightly obsessed with it right after I watched it, because it was like, it sucks you in. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
It's really good at showing that like personal human side of the story. These people are Star Wars fans through and through, no matter what. And they do a good job of showing, even after episode 1 comes out, there are a lot of people are like, oh, this isn't very good. I'm going to go back and watch it 3 or 4 times just to make sure I didn't miss it. And then there are still people that are like, no, you know what? I like it. And then there are people that are like, you know what? This is actually just for kids. Kids like it. And I'm just not a kid anymore. It's not for me. I think it does a good job of showing up. Like, it's like part of it's about George Lucas and what he did and everything he's done. But a lot of it is also about just holding a mirror up to the fans and being like, this is what you look like. This is how you're like behaving. This is your own hypocrisy. You're criticizing him for being a hypocrite. And he is, and you should, but you are kind of in a similar way feeling entitled that why is he not making exactly what I want him to make? Why is he not? Right. Which, I mean, I get. I have that argument against a lot of people that are upset about reboots. Like, oh, you're rebooting this thing I love. I love the original. How dare you? That sucks. Most people in those situations don't really have an argument, because you still have the original thing that you love. Just if you like the original, that's fine. Enjoy the original. The new thing is for different people. But Star Wars is a little different, because you don't have the originals anymore. He literally he phased them out, refuses to release them, re-edited them.
He not just phased them out, he actually destroyed.
Yeah. Destroyed the original negatives. And he's like, well, sorry, we can't make it. Even if we wanted to put out an original version, we can't, because we destroyed it. And it's like, what a dick move to be like, this is the version. This is my version. I'm taking my toys and going home, kind of thing.
I mean, at least Blade Runner had like 5 different versions of one film. You got to pick which one you wanted. I own all of them. They all came in one pack. It's like, well, which version do I feel like watching? I mean, there's only
Leave it up to the people. Yeah. Yeah, but I think that's also another interesting part of that about that documentary is it's called The People versus George Lucas, and it's partly about the people and how culture kind of adopts art as soon as it's released. As soon as it leaves the hands of the artist has decided it's done enough for people to see it. The culture owns it, kind of, in a way. That's been the conflict, where George Lucas wants to hold on to something, but it's been released. It's out of his hands. These people have taken it. They've adopted it. They've started making their own things about it, like remaking it. And it's just a totally different animal, I guess. And I think that's an interesting thing about artists. And do you actually own something after it's been released? It shows that in a kind of a new, interesting way with a new, interesting subject.
Yeah. Especially when it takes the freaking pop culture, like, it's just, good Lord.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
You know, it's funny, for as much as I love film, like, I'll watch a lot more making of featurettes and quick little documentaries on the discs and stuff. I watch those more than I'll watch a full-length documentary about Hollywood itself. But I did watch about a couple of actors this last week. Okay. So I watched Val. Did you watch Val?
I did. We were actually watching it just before I came down to record, so it's fresh in my mind. Okay. I knew I had to. I was so excited to. I was a little nervous too because I love Val Kilmer, and I know he's had like a tragic story and tragic life, and I didn't want to cry, but I was excited about it, and it's great.
Man, that one hit different for me. I was not like, I expected to kind of get hit in the feels a little bit, but there's like a humility in Val Kilmer now, like a really healthy, just, he's so humble and he's so at peace, and it's so crazy seeing him that peaceful and just that, like, yeah, I got kind of dealt a bad hand, but oh well. Yeah, that one hit way different. I definitely got a little like dust in the eyeballs.
There's something in both my eyes.
Right. Why won't it stop?
Yeah.
I thought it was so well done, not just with like it. His documentary is so unique. Yeah, because it's like unfinished film clips that he himself recorded. So it's pretty like splotchy, but it flowed really well. But what I loved, my favorite little detail, his son narrates it. Yeah. And I didn't realize that. And it's so cool as the son's narrating it, because you can tell they probably didn't do very many takes. His kid is literally just reading his script. Like there's no
Yeah, I thought that was so interesting because for people that don't know, Val Kilmer had throat cancer and he can't talk super well or super clearly. He does talk in the documentary a fair amount, but most of it is stuff he's written for his son to read about his life and about his experiences on movie sets and everything. Yeah. And yeah, it was really fun seeing his son like reading stuff. He'd be like reading, and then he would like, he'd be learning things while he's reading it. He's like, oh, I didn't know that happened, or that was true about. And so like kind of cuts away from what you're watching, and it's just him in the studio like, oh, wow, is that real? I didn't know that. But yeah, it's really interesting. I think it does a good job of balancing him as a person and his own like personal journey. And part of the reason it's so unique is that he's been filming things like on his personal cameras
like his whole life.
Yeah, saving reels of things, saving videotapes of things that he just filmed on home video his whole life. And so he has a lot of content to be able to go back and splice in that you don't normally have. As soon as you're like, I'm going to make a documentary about this thing, and you have to try to find old footage or old photos of things that nobody knew you were going to document it, so why would they care? Yeah. But he has a lot of like content of really interesting things throughout his life, throughout his family's life, and his whole career. It goes kind of through. I was
childhood
on this thing,
like present day.
I went to
crazy.
I went to Juilliard, then I worked on this movie, and I worked on this movie, and I got divorced during this movie, and it's like, it's just kind of crazy and beautiful. I think it's really well done.
Yeah, it was one of the more heavy hitting, but not in a like broken-hearted way. It just for me, when it ended, it was one of those where immediately I was like, I have to tell everyone about this. I was like, I love it when I watch something or listen to something or see something where you're immediately just so compelled to be like, I have to tell everyone about this. Like, everyone needs to hear about it. So please go watch Val. It's on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, it's special.
So it really is special.
Yeah, I was a little nervous being such a massive Val Kilmer fan that I was like, every time he got to the segment where he's like, and then I started working on Top Gun. I was like, oh, please don't be a terrible experience. I want to still like Top Gun. And he's like, and then I started working on Heat. I was like, oh, please, I really like Heat. Don't mess it up. And then he's like, and then I worked on Tombstone. I'm like, no, Tombstone, please be good in Tombstone. And then he's like, yeah, it was great. Everybody was great. And I was like, yes, I still love Tombstone.
I love seeing like, man, all those behind the scenes things, especially the Tombstone one. That was one of the more like just lighthearted, enjoyable, like handy cam segments of the film. I felt him and Kurt Russell just joking around. Kurt Russell, I'm like, oh my God, I want to hang out with Kurt Russell so much.
Oh yeah.
Because he looks like he's just having such a great time. I love that. Love that. And I thought it was cool that you got to learn how his approach to like filming certain things, especially Doc Holliday's final scene. I didn't know that. I thought that was really cool. And kind of like, you're a little insane for doing that. I don't know that I would, but
yeah, I don't know that a lot of people appreciate how method Val Kilmer kind of is and how much he gravitated towards like deep, interesting characters. And then his struggle with doing not deep, like third characters where he's like, oh, you just kind of got given this thing and it kind of sucks, but you get to do something cool later on. So he gets excited about that.
Yeah, cool. It was a very interesting, very honest. And that is really, of all the documentaries that I've watched that really stand out to me, are the ones where it's not polished, where the honesty is the focal point. And I thought Val did that so amazing. And I thought You Cannot Kill David Arquette.
Yeah, buddy.
Perfectly. I was freaking blown away by You Cannot Kill David Arquette. Blown away by that documentary. Oh my God.
Of all of the like wrestling documentaries that I've seen, I'm glad that that's the one that you're going to talk about because it's very new, came out very recently, but it is really good.
Like goosebumps just rethinking about it. That one, I wasn't expecting that. I've always liked David Arquette, but I was never like, yeah, David Arquette, you know. Watching that, I was like, I kind of want to give this guy a hug. I don't I feel like he needs a genuine just hug. I will go be childlike with this dude. I will goof off with this dude. I feel like I need to. I was so blown away by that.
He's a very interesting, very unique kind of person, and that like childlike excitement definitely comes out. And I really like how honest his like the film shows him and his life and his friendship with his like celebrity friends and things, and also his wife, like Courtney Cox, how they still, I mean, even though they're divorced, they're like still friends. They still like raise kids together. They still hang out. And his new wife is super cool and everything. But yeah, as a wrestling fan, I always heard about David Arquette and like how he was given the title in this like little match, and it was like the most ridiculous, underhanded thing. And it's always been a joke of like, oh, this champion sucks, but at least he's better than David Arquette, who was just kind of handed it. But then to hear how he took that thing, took it so personally that everybody hated him, that he was the champion for like a gag, and took it so personally that he decided to like become an actual professional wrestler. Well, he always loved wrestling, but he wanted to actually like do it for real, earn back the respect, is such an interesting thing.
And man, seeing the lengths that he was willing to go through or did go through just to get like a little bit of trust, a little bit of respect from the community of wrestling fans. I was blown. I was like, God, I think on average, most people probably would have given up or probably been like, not, you know, it's not worth it. Screw them. But he just kept going for it. I feel some of those backyard wrestling dudes, I was like, you guys have taken this too far. You are so far on the extreme scale. You really need to calm down. You need a girlfriend or something in your life to kind of ground you. But yeah, I was his honesty in that one. And then just the rawness with all of his substance abuse struggles, even during the time of filming, I was I love that kind of honesty. I love that vulnerability. I was so blown away by that film. I couldn't believe it. And I was like, I can't wait to tell Jake. I almost texted you to be like, guess what I'm watching? But I was like, no, I gotta wait. He'll appreciate it more if I tell him after or like while we film.
Yeah, I'm so glad you watched that one. It's a really, really good documentary. And even for people that don't like or even don't even know David Arquette and aren't fans of wrestling, I think that it tells the story in a great way that you can totally follow the context, the significance of what he's doing, why he's doing it, and you can just tell it means a lot to him. Like, he takes it very personally. He's a huge fan of this thing and he wants to do it right, and it comes across, I think, very well.
It does. Yeah, that was another one where I was like, I feel like people need to watch this one. Whether you're a fan of wrestling or David Arquette in general, you need to watch this, because it does such a great job of just showing someone following through with a goal. Like, you set a goal, you know the obstacles that are going to be showing up in your way, and how do you process and move through that. I thought it was one of the better documentaries, just kind of showing a human story. And that, I mean, essentially that's what documentaries come down to, is just telling, except for the animal ones, but just telling a human story where it's trying to strip away as much as possible and just show you the reality. I love it. And it's kind of funny for me. There's a tendency where the creative art documentaries, for me, do that better than a lot of the other ones, because I feel like there's a different agenda with some of the more controversial style, and that kind of turns me off from that. You know, I made a joke about him earlier, but we grew up in the time when Michael Moore was the name above documentaries, and his documentaries suck. They're horrible.
Literally. Okay, so I rewatched them this week because I hadn't seen them in a long time. I have watched, I think, all of his major ones. I haven't watched Sicko. I don't really care to. But Bowling for Columbine and Convenient Truth, Fahrenheit 9/11, I've seen them all. And I'm rewatching them. The first note I took after watching them was, Michael Moore is a mediocre director, a very scattered writer, and a terrible interviewer.
Horrible at it. I think Bowling for Columbine exposes him as the horrible interviewer and manipulator. Almost more so than like Fahrenheit 9/11 did. I think for most part, I mean, Fahrenheit 9/11, everyone saw that when it came out. And I know so many people when it came out who were like, this was wrong. Like, there was so much shit from people on both sides that were like, you could tell a lot of this was fabricated. You could tell this was like so manipulated. But I think Bowling for Columbine was a big exposure of that kind of mentality that he's got. And that really came from a lot of the, like, oddly, not just the random people he interviewed, but from the celebrity interviewers. I know Matt Stone and Trey Parker came out almost immediately after it got released and were like, he completely changed how that interview actually went. He completely, like, re-edited when we said things, how we, like, he changed the whole thing. I thought that was really telling, and probably the wrong two guys to try and manipulate an interview with, because you know they're going to come out and be like, this guy sucks. He's so bad at what he does. Their
entire brand is saying whatever they believe and calling people out for being shit and making fun of people who are ridiculous. And so all of a sudden you're a big target by them.
Well, and I mean, at the heart of it, a lot of the people that were interviewed for that documentary had come out and been like, it's kind of disrespectful to the victims of, like, Columbine and other mass shootings when you're just trying to manipulate it. And unfortunately, our media has been following the Michael Moore formula for decades.
He definitely has a lot of media copycats, I guess, in that sense. But it definitely feels exploitative, where he's like, oh, this is a highly emotional thing that everybody has a visceral response to, just like barely talking about it, and then I'm going to push it and a lot of the terrible interview tactics are he will ambush people and just like not let them prepare for a conversation about this thing. Like going to the Kmart offices, it's like, I'm here to talk to you about how you sold these bullets and to these guys that killed these kids. It's like, we're a store that sells like t-shirts and underwear and like Tupperware and stuff.
Lots of stuff.
Yeah. And he just like ambushes these people that are unprepared for it. And it kind of sets them up that there's not really anything they can do. Like from a PR perspective, they need to say, okay, we can't have this conversation. You're just kind of dropping all this responsibility on us and that we're not prepared for. We can't talk to you. And then they look like a dick for not talking to you. And so that's just kind of he sets people up so that they can't succeed. He's not trying to find an answer or a middle ground. He's just trying to exploit emotions, I think.
Yeah. He's not the only one that's done that. He's just the most famous one, I feel.
Yeah.
And it kind of documentaries like that, like I tend to not watch political documentaries for those reasons, because they all seem to be so heavily biased. And we said it earlier, you shouldn't be going into the documentary already super biased, especially if you're going to cover a political topic or a social topic, honestly. You need to kind of be very level. You need to be so neutral and just let people be able to figure out where they stand on something.
Yeah. It's interesting. You mentioned that he just kind of fabricates things. I noticed a lot of that, obviously, in Bowling for Columbine. He just states falsehoods as facts, it's so easy to say something in a documentary, flash something on screen as some supporting evidence, and move on from it. And then people like subconsciously are like, oh, okay, that's true. I'm with you. I'm understanding. I'm moving on. And then, but you don't give them time to think about the context or the reality or whatever. Inconvenient Truth is the same kind of thing. It's not really a documentary because it's mostly just a TED Talk with a little bit of boring footage.
Just Al Gore in front of the camera.
Yeah, it's mostly a TED Talk, and then there's some spliced in footage of him the riveting footage of him making a PowerPoint on his Mac, which is very exciting. But Inconvenient Truth, there was a lot of things that you can read about. That's like, and we also have the context of 10, 20 years later. It's like, oh, all of these glaciers would be gone by 2015. All of these things like Kilimanjaro will never have snow again. It's like, well, we do still have snow. We do still have glaciers. Some have grown, some have shrunk. Like, it's nuanced. It's not clear cut. And it's not they just frame it in such this is an emergency. The only solution is to give politics more power. And it just feels manipulative.
Right. And I mean, that's politics for you. Politics is manipulative. So I tend to stay away from those documentaries. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, you set me up for a segue, and I don't want to waste it, which is going into a subject with extreme bias is generally bad, but I have an example where it's actually very interesting. So,
I'm sure, because I do have. There's one subject that I'm very okay with the extreme biasness. And that's going towards the scariest thing I've ever watched in my life, but we'll get to that here in a minute. Just a little bit.
I have a guess about what that is, and I'm excited to get to that. But my thing was, there's a documentary called The Red Pill, which is about kind of an uncomfortable subject. It's about men's rights activists, basically, which, if you have never even heard of men's rights activists or things like that, it's definitely, it's the perception you get immediately, and the perception in media and the perception in everything is that these guys are huge douchebags who are misogynists and hate women and all of these things. But this documentary is made by a woman who is like a lifelong feminist, and she kind of sets it up as like her whole life experience has been these things. she's tried to get into acting, experienced like misogyny and like expectations on women there and kind of like superficial things. And then she heard about men's rights activists and online and what they are. And so she tried to like she went into it trying to just figure it out. And over time, kind of like got to know some of them and listened to them and understood that, oh, a lot of these guys actually have like real messages or really good positive things that they're like, hey, like the court system is extremely biased against men, and we would really like to be able to be fathers to our kids, but they just kind of by default give custody to mothers, stuff like that. And or like the suicide rate is hugely leaning towards male, or the homeless rate is hugely leaning towards male, and all these things. And so she just kind of got to know them. And even though she was a feminist, kind of her mind was kind of opened up to like the other side, I guess, that, oh, these guys are people, and not, you can believe two things at once. It's not that you have to, if you start believing that men's rights or whatever you want to call it, is important and significant, that means that you have to like stop caring about feminism and all that stuff. Two things can exist at the same time. You can care that women are treated well and care that men are treated fairly at the same time. And so I think that it was a really well done and really interesting documentary from that perspective.
I'll have to check that one out. That sounds a little hot topic-y, or at least like in a good way, kind of exposing something. So yeah, I'll have to check that one out. The Red Pill.
Yeah, The Red Pill. It was made by, hold on, I have the girl's name right here. Cassie J is the director of it, and she's really interesting.
There's one, it came out a while ago. I can't remember what year. I don't really care. This was one that came out, and I remember when it came out, so many people, it had everyone talking, and it had a lot of people freaking out and kind of turning away from, and really, I guess, wanting to suddenly go vegetarian or vegan based off of guilt. So I don't know if you ever saw it, but I remember when the documentary Food Inc. came out, and everyone was like, oh my God, I won't ever be able to eat meat again thanks to this thing. First off, I watched this because I wanted to see what all the hubbub was.
Right.
Dumb documentary. I remember I didn't even bother to rewatch it because I remember being just so annoyed by it, because it was like watching a Michael Moore documentary.
Michael Meyer, she's great.
Right. No. Michael Meyer, cool. Pro 80s slasher killer, anti Michael Moore. It was like watching his style of documentary, but involving food. And yes, a lot of it I already knew. And honestly, I kind of felt, shouldn't everyone have already known that like chicken farms are not the cleanest places? They're not well kept. They're not, I mean, they're gross. Have you ever been in a chicken coop? They're gross. You have one, and it's small.
It's not like stacking chickens on top of each other like some farms are, but wherever you are, there's a lot of, I mean, animals in general can be certainly gross. I find those kinds of documentaries very interesting, especially the response like you just mentioned. People are like, oh, I'm never going to eat meat again because these animals are treated so terribly. The message isn't that meat is bad. The message is that animals being mistreated is bad. You can certainly have well-treated animals.
Yeah, and, you know, it ended, and the first thing I did was like, well, I guess I'm going to go and get some food. And I ordered meat and ate it proudly because I immediately felt resentful and almost defensive of like, you're not going to guilt me into this. And that's what the problem to me was it seemed to be focused on making you feel bad for being a consumer of this meat.
I feel like I see that in us in several different places, and I don't know how big the population is. I have to assume the amount of people that don't think about the fact that meat comes from animals, and animals were once alive, and you have to kill them in order to take the meat out of them is very small. You have to be a complete idiot to not understand how that works. And if that hurts you or offends you or scares you or makes you sad or whatever, that's okay. Just don't. I think that it's important for people to acknowledge reality. This is how, if you are going to eat plants, you have to kill the plants in order to put it in your mouth, in order to digest it and get the nutrients from it. So these things that were alive, you can be grateful for them. You can be kind to them. And then you can also eat them. And it's important to just be aware and understand the whole process, and not just, if you have to like pretend that it was just, it never was a thing and it just showed up in the supermarket.
There. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so sad. Let's be real. This is what it is. And it's a good thing and it's beautiful, and move on.
Right. And, you know, it was kind of funny for me after watching it, because I remember being like, I bet people are going to take this as like closed-minded, typical meat eater, what have you.
Yeah.
I will have you know, not you. Actually, I think your wife has probably made you do this as well. I do tend to try, every time I buy meat, whether it's chicken or beef, pork, whatever, I do gravitate towards like the free range, all the like, I guess, post Food Inc. stuff. Not because of Food Inc., but it does genuinely taste better. I feel like it does taste better when it's on the better side than the process side. But yeah, Food Inc., if anything, honestly, I kind of felt like Food Inc. made me feel, you know, maybe as a species, us humans, especially those that don't hunt or have never been to like a slaughterhouse or anything like that, maybe we should find kind of some time or an opportunity. I don't want to say opportunity. That sounds odd to say, but, you know, find a kind of force ourselves to be a part of that cycle. There's I read a thing with actually one of my favorite musicians who flat out said, hey man, if you're no one, like, I don't care if you eat meat. I don't care if you're vegan, vegetarian, whatever. But if you're going to consume these things, you should know what it's like to kill these things. So I like that you brought up plants are still a living thing. Right. So every time you pick a flower or pick the plants from the garden, like you're essentially killing it slowly.
Yeah. Just because it doesn't have a face with big brown eyes like a cow has, who's like adorable and cute, it's still a thing. And like science has even gone to the point of being like, no, it has feelings. It responds when you like talk. Plants respond when you talk to them.
They're saying that you need to talk like nice little loving things to the plants, and it helps them grow better. I don't know all that. I can't keep a plant alive if my life depended on it. It just wouldn't happen.
But there's certainly a difference between something that is kept alive in a nice environment and something that is in an uncomfortable or confined or forced environment. And like you mentioned, it tastes better, but that's primarily because if you are able to move around and exercise and be healthier and eat good food as opposed to just stuffing you full of crap calories and stuff, it's just going to be healthy. It's going to feel better. And I want the animals that I eat and the animals in my like life and house and stuff to have a good life. I think that that's noble.
Right. And
even if I'm going to eat them.
I mean, don't eat all the animals in your household. That would be fucked up.
Sorry, Murphy, I'm not going to eat you. Don't worry.
But I remember being annoyed by that kind of documentary. The guilt trip documentary, I have an issue with. It's just
another
to me,
perspective.
It's such a bad way to go about it.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that people, at least you and me, we've talked about it, but I'm sure people in general can tell when they're being manipulated, and it hurts the documentary's motive or topic or thesis, basically, when someone feels like they're being manipulated into believing something, that's going to make them shut off to it or push it away, kind of thing. I think this in a similar vein as Food Inc., but done in a different way that I think is more impactful, is probably another one of the more famous documentaries up there with Michael Moore, is Morgan Spurlock's documentaries about Super Size Me and like fast food and stuff.
Right. Which is a very entertaining documentary. It starts off kind of lighthearted and you're laughing about it. You can't believe this dude is going to eat one item from, like, he eats the entire McDonald's menu for a month, right? It was 30 days.
Yeah, he like only eats McDonald's. He has to like get
breakfast, lunch,
from
and
the
dinner.
menu.
And if they ask if he wants to supersize it, he has to agree to it, but he doesn't always get asked about that. But watching that's a pretty good, pretty well done documentary, in my opinion, just because he set off just as turning himself into a science experiment. He wanted to see what is the actual effects. Like, I can't measure this out super long term, so I'm going to do it kind of a very unhealthy way. And the doctors in it all tell him, like, don't do this. Please don't do this.
He turned himself into like a guinea pig in a pressure cooker, where instead of like normal people, I mean, I don't eat McDonald's very often, but maybe say the average American eats McDonald's once a month, maybe once a week at most. He's like, no, I'm eating it 3 meals a day, 7 days a week for a month straight, just to see what's going to happen. Like, I'm curious what will happen to me. And it's interesting. It certainly makes for an interesting documentary to see what happens to him.
Very interesting. Definitely eye-opening, which is kind of funny to say, because immediately everyone assumes they know, oh, it's so bad for you to do that. I bet you gained a lot of weight. But what you don't really take into account is all of the issues that kind of start forming inside of your body. It's not just that you gain a bunch of weight, but like the cholesterol, suddenly your heart is beating irregularly. Oh, you're getting sick. Your immune system is way down. Like, it's kind of crazy seeing what all of that processed food actually ends up doing. And I think that's what, I mean, he used McDonald's as just his variable. Just
because it's the most popular fast food in the world,
But it was really just, here's an effect of all the processed food that we have bought into and will continue to buy into. I mean, we're processed food sucks, but it's such a major part and vital part to everything, and that goes into more. But
and it's so popular. It's so popular because it's like ridiculously cheap, like cheaper than food should be.
Yeah.
And it's
to cook and all that. It's
and it's so kind of scary. I've seen things where people will like, even people, I've had friends who like inadvertently leave like, you know, fries or a hamburger or something in the back of their car. But I've seen like doctors like just put it on their shelf, and then years later, it hasn't molded. It hasn't done things normal food should do. It's like, what is this stuff if it's not food?
It has even maintained its original shape. It has maintained like everything. Even the buns have maintained. And you're like, all of that should be the biggest red flag when it comes to the food that we're putting into our systems.
Yeah.
Now, full disclosure, did I stop eating processed food? Well, I don't eat McDonald's, but no, I still eat my fast food. And I do it, and every time I do it, I'm like, idiot. Because my excuse is always, it's so convenient. And then I'm like,
it is.
You dumbass.
That's the human conundrum, which is balancing convenience versus like value, I guess, what's actually good for you. It's so convenient. And it's not just McDonald's. Like, I've read things about Subway and how like the chicken in Subway sandwiches is like not completely chicken DNA. It's mostly not chicken. It's mostly soy. It's kind of like they do a lot of weird things to it. But it makes me more conscious of like,
I think Taco Bell is probably my favorite and the funniest fast food, processed food kind of place, because every fast food joint got exposed for something.
Yeah.
Of like, none of this is 100% real. Why are you advertising it? Taco Bell gets exposed and they come out laughing and they're like, no shit, it's processed. Like, of course that meat is not 100% beef. Have you seen it?
Right.
So I always give Taco Bell a little more respect and a little more like, good on you, just because they did come out and they owned it. Like, yeah, it's processed, it's fake. I mean, you're not coming here. Their demographic is not going there for a gourmet meal. Their demographic is there to take care of a,
craving, third meal, fourth meal, what they call it.
Yeah. Like,
they're open to like 3 a.m. for a reason. It's for people that are drunk or whatever.
Yeah, they're part of the after effect of certain recreational activities. It's and they know it and they own it. It's awesome.
Yeah. They found their niche.
They did. And
on the topic of, you do got to give it to them. On the topic of how convenience kind of dictates our lives, another one of my favorite documentaries that kind of smacks you in the face with, one of the hardest things to balance with convenience is security. And anybody who's like looked into security and how important it is to like have secure passwords and your laptop cameras and all this stuff, convenience is like the big thing that you conflict with. Like if it's a little bit inconvenient, people will stop doing it and they'll just like, whatever, I don't care. I'll use the same password, everything, all this stuff. So barely related to that, tangentially related to that, there's a documentary called Citizen 4, which is all about like Edward Snowden and, and like his whistleblowing on the US government and CIA and spying on citizens and all this stuff. It's really good and really interesting. And they have to like leave the country to find him. And he like reads emails like under a sheet so that other things around him can't like see what he's doing. And of course covers the camera on his laptop, as I have the camera recording me right now. I'm sure the US government's watching me, but it's really interesting and getting like his specific perspective. I feel like Edward Snowden is a name that a lot of people have heard, but not a lot of people have probably really listened to him in a long form conversation about what he did and why he did it and the response from the government to him. Most people are like, oh, he came out and said some stuff. Congress had a couple meetings. He had to leave the country. He's kind of like, will be arrested if he ever comes back, that kind of thing.
I mean, he's a wanted man.
Yeah.
It's not like his time away has brushed it under the rug.
It's
they
kind
still
of like
want him.
It's kind of like the scary side of like being a spy. Even though he's not a spy, he's still like, oh, they're not just, oh, if you ever come through customs at the airport, yeah, you'll be arrested. It's like, no, these people are actively trying to like get him to slip up, getting other governments to turn him over. Like if he gets arrested in another country for something else, immediately the U.S. government will be like, hey, extradite him to the U.S. Yeah. So it's like, it's kind of just a crazy life for him to live, and to make that sacrifice just to get this information to the American people, who most of them probably don't care, probably have no idea, don't care, who cares? But you maybe should look into it. Maybe should at least support this guy. He's like it's a crazy story. And I think
it is a crazy story.
It's kind of an important one. It's kind of like the one that we mentioned where like journalists, like if you are a journalist and you approach a documentary as like a news story in like a way that tells an interesting story as honestly as possible, good and bad, that's important and valuable, I think, to the audience.
Yeah. Another thing that I think really helps a documentary, depending on the subject matter, the documentarian themselves, they have to kind of make a conscious decision to put themselves or have an understanding, a piece about, I'm going to be in a potentially dangerous situation. I'm going to potentially be like followed by the government. I would imagine, depending on the subject matter, you probably have to have some involvement with the government where you're going to have to interview with them. They will probably want to look at your footage or keep tabs on your footage. Which is, I mean, sure. I think you expect that kind of danger to be with like documentaries about anything overseas, Middle East kind of stuff. You expect that. What you don't typically expect is super dangerous, sketchy situations involving belief structures and systems. And that is going to segue into the scariest freaking documentary I have ever watched in my life. Refuse to watch it again. And in fact, my daughter and I, she was looking at my long list of documentaries that I've watched, ones that have kind of impacted me. And I have this one early on the list and starred. She was like, what is Going Clear? And I was like, all jokes aside, I mean, it was a very serious moment for me and her. It was a very solemn moment for us where I told her, you know, as you grow older, I don't really mind what kind of belief system you choose for yourself as long as you're doing it for you, not for other people. But I told her, if you ever encounter someone who is all for Scientology, all for trying to get you to be a part of this groupthink cult mentality, if people ever mention to you like the word cult, word Scientology, try to get you to pay to be a part of whatever their belief structure is, you stay as far away from those people as possible. Like, there was no joke. She understood, oh, Dad is not kidding around. This is a very serious thing. Going Clear. So I was one, and you know this, I was one for the longest time made fun of Scientology quite a bit. I remember at one point I even joked with a mutual friend of ours of like, we should go into a Scientology center because there was one in Denver, if I remember right. And to like, oh, we'll mess around there. We'll like just be general assholes to them and move on.
Right.
We never did. We chose to go have some beer instead. Good choice. But, you know, I made fun of it all the time. Made fun of Tom Cruise all the time, John Travolta all the time. And then I watched Going Clear, and post Going Clear viewing and post anything with Leah Remini involving Scientology, I don't joke about Scientology anymore. It is not funny to me. It is genuinely frightening and pure evil to me. You know, we've made comments on our little show. I don't do well with cult films, cult mentality, and Going Clear is everything that is why I don't do well with that stuff. It's all right there. To the point where the guy making the documentary is being stalked. Like, his life is threatened. His family and friends' lives are threatened by these members. That is insane. I honestly, like, after watching it, I remember just being like, how are they operating? Why aren't they not? And it's semantics why they're still operating, which is bullshit. But like, think about it, I was fearful for the guy making the documentary because you might vanish. Like, your life is in danger right now. What the hell? So
Scientology is so extreme about suppressing these people and any sort of naysayers. Leah Remini's show is really, really interesting as someone who was in Scientology and got out. And the guy who co-hosts it with her, Mike, I forget his last name. he was like a high level person in Scientology who was like responsible for hunting down suppressive persons and stuff. And they go to such extreme levels, and how they're able to get away with it is insane, but it's very scary and fascinating.
Yeah, that's one of the documentaries. I do recommend it to everyone. Mm-hmm. And I do tell them it's the scariest thing I've ever watched in my life, or at least one of them. You don't feel good after it ends. You feel kind of gross. Mm-hmm. But that kind of mentality, because the documentarian, the guy making it, he literally was just like, I'm just trying to understand. I just want to know kind of what the workings of this stuff is. There's a lot of whispers. There's a lot of
hearsay,
kind of polished stuff about it. What is actually going on? And I'll never, like, I was so uncomfortable during the whole thing. I felt gross and ill during the whole thing. But then when they show, like, the footage of the full gathering inside the hall, and they've got freaking flags draped in their colors, and, like, the high-level members are showing up in naval uniforms, and they're saluting a photo of L. Ron Hubbard. Everything about it, and then the cherry on top where they separate children from their family, take them to different areas to brainwash them, force them to follow the Scientology path.
Yeah.
Sounding familiar, people? Like, this is... you get a well-spoken leader who inspires a lot of passion, a lot of emotion, and the whole group, the response and everything. I mean, it was like watching those old videos of Hitler addressing the Nazis. Fucking terrifying. Don't do well with it. It's
yeah, it's definitely scary stuff. And Going Clear is really, really good about it. I've seen that one. I've also seen Louis Louis Theroux has a one called My Scientology Movie, and where he kind of tackles that topic as well. I think that Louis Theroux is a good documentary filmmaker because he does like go into those serious situations, ones that you can't avoid having a bias against. He has another one about it's about the Westboro Baptist Church and their like whole family, which is also kind of cult like. I think it's called The Most Hated Family in America. But going into conversations with the most hated family in America, I think he approaches it pretty well, where he's like he's not like the most cordial and nice to these people. He's like, yeah, you suck, your perception, like people's perception of you sucks, but he's still at the heart of it trying to get their story and like figure out, why do you go and protest military funerals? Like, why you go and like hold up signs around like gay marriages and stuff? It's like, why are you such assholes? And he's like actually trying to get to the heart of it. And, which I think is interesting, even though the ending is kind of predetermined. Nobody's going to have their mind changed that, oh, these are great people, but you at least are able to hopefully able to get an honest view into something that you didn't know before. And even the most heinous, asinine people, whether they're Hitler or Scientologists or Westboro Baptists or whatever, there is still, I think, value in showing the world through a documentary. These are just people. Like, even though they're not a boogeyman, they're not some monster under the bed, like with some superpower or whatever. Obviously, some like Scientology has like major control over being allowed to operate and being allowed to like steal people's money or force them to like live there or whatever. And they shouldn't, but they're just people. And the more you know about them and the more you see truth about them, the more the truth comes out. And that's good. Like that light will battle the darkness. And so those kinds of things are interesting.
Genuinely, when the day comes, and I'm like, it's got to come. It has to. In our day and age, how can it not? But I'm like, when the day comes when Scientology does get toppled, I am not a member, but I feel like I will legitimately, and I don't ever use this word, but it's the only word coming to mind. I will legitimately rejoice. I will have to be like so elated that entity of evil is gone. I can't wait for that day. I don't even know anyone in Scientology. I'm so afraid for everyone that's in it and are forced to stay in it. I'm like afraid for that. It's so weird to have that. Like, I've never been so in my lifetime, from what I have grown up around or lived through. This is one of those things I'm passionately fearful for the people in it. And it's so weird. And Going Clear just really like brought all of those emotions for me to the forefront, which was weird because I was expecting just to laugh my ass off during it. And then it was like polar opposite effect. I debated watching my Scientology movie. I almost watched it. And then I was like, nope. I've listened to the Leah Remini interviews. I've watched her show. I've watched Going Clear. I think my cup runneth over. I'm good.
You got the gist of it. You pretty much know everything there is to know about why it sucks.
Right.
Yeah. It's watching those things, especially this day and age when you have the internet and shows on all kinds of channels about it. It's really hard to not know how terribly these things like affect people, how these families, so many of these families that you see their faces and see how they're affected, they've been like torn apart because this person really wants to stay in and this person had to get out. They can't be in contact ever again because of it.
Yeah.
And it's just so sad and so terrible.
Insane. There was another documentary on the same lines as like belief systems and structures.
Yeah.
It is funny. It is very unbiased, and it does expose a lot of hypocrisies on all sides of things. So that it's on Hulu. It's called Hail Satan, but with a question mark. It's genuinely entertaining. It's very funny. I do recommend it. It is not anti like Satanism or even pro Satanism. It's legitimately just about here's what modern Satanism actually looks like, but they do it in a way where they make it a point to even show you the extremists as a reminder that it doesn't matter what your faith is, what your belief system is, any of it. It doesn't matter. You will always have extremists that take it too far and completely miss the point, misinterpret something and miss the point. And I thought that was really cool that they made sure to include that in this with a few of the Satanic Church members. But it was really funny to me because they show so many hypocrisies when it comes to freedom of religion, especially in America. Very entertaining. It does make you uncomfortable a handful of times, but it's supposed to. And then and then there's a bunch of other times where they show you, the satanic members doing really wonderful, good things in their communities, and you're like, what? It's and then you see the extremists that are like, oh, you're the stereotype. You should not be around. You should probably rethink your priorities. But it does a pretty good job of all sides of the spectrum. I didn't feel that they were trying to really swing you with one thought or even really like completely 180 your opinion or belief. It was simply just maybe what you think you've known based off of stereotype and hyped up media fear. Maybe that's not actually what is going on. I think one of the funniest parts is when they actually go to the court system and with like the Constitution and like the laws of freedom of religion stuff. And because they want to say, hey, if you're allowed to have the 10 Commandments outside of a federal court building, then we should be allowed to have Baphomet right next to it. And they actually put a Baphomet statue right next to the 10 Commandments. It's funny as hell.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting kind of...
It's funny.
It's an interesting kind of topic because I think a lot of people's opinions about Satanism and that subject are basically just formed off of the name alone and not so much having any sort of information about what it is or why it was started or what the point of it is and that kind of thing. And obviously there are people that take it too far, and there are people that, like, a lot of people probably do it as like a fuck you to Christianity kind of thing. It's like they're very bitter and attacking, but then there are very people that are very wholesome and don't really. So you'll have that in any case. I mean, if you go to like the Catholic Church, you have the exact same thing. People who are very serious, too controlling, all that kind of thing, and people who are, whatever. I'm Italian, a Catholic. I don't give a fuck. You know? So it's like
worst impression ever. But
I didn't practice it.
If you want one it tackles a heavy subject, anything religion based is always going to be heavy. But it does it in such a interesting kind of way. It's not the best documentary I've ever seen. There are parts of it that I think, you could have like showed more of this or gone a little more into that direction, showed me more of these people over here. But it's pretty decent. It's definitely entertaining, and it does have some very funny moments that just really expose hypocrisy when it comes to like our freedom of or freedom from religion. It's so I respect it for that aspect. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah,
and you're not going to feel anywhere near as gross after watching that as you would after watching anything Scientology based.
That's very true.
So
on more like a lighthearted note, there's a documentary recently. I was like, we need to bring this back up a little bit.
Yep.
Recently there was a documentary about Blockbuster called The Last Blockbuster.
Yeah.
And I really liked it.
A handful of times.
Yeah, I watched it fairly recently, so it's still fresh in my memory. But it's fun because it's a lot of nostalgia. It's a lot of people, especially like they have like interviews with like famous people, actors and stuff who are like, oh man, what it was like to go to a Blockbuster on like a Friday night and pick out a couple of movies, pick up some snacks. It was just such a magical experience. And for that to be gone, how sad that is. And then of course it touches on the last Blockbuster. There is a Blockbuster still existing in Bend, Oregon that is like trying to hold on to like the name and everything, trying to renegotiate with like the parent company that doesn't care about them at all. And so it's interesting.
I definitely, as a sucker, not a sucker, because I know I love nostalgia. I love just that time period of life. Yeah, man. Tuesday nights, because Tuesdays were new release days. If you didn't make it to the video store when they opened, chances are you were not going to see that new release that night.
Yeah.
But Friday nights, there was something about you get with your friends, hey, I'm staying the night at a friend's house. We're renting a movie. And it was like, we're going to try to get there early enough. You got to convince your friends' parents to drive you there early enough so that you can get a copy of the new release that you want. You get your overpriced candy, just like at the theater. You do it all, but not the theater experience. Instead of the theater experience, you're just getting the like at home kind of more intimate experience with like your friends and family ish in a way.
I feel like it was so much
livelihood.
It was so much more satisfying to be able to go to the store, walk down the aisles, and like, what do we feel like? Do we feel like something funny? Okay, let's go to the comedy aisle. You're going down, you're seeing all the titles on the shelves. You get to pick them up, look at it. What is this? I've never heard of this. It was so much more satisfying than sitting on your couch, like flipping through Netflix, being like, no, 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 no. And so you got to like touch it. You got to like ask the people that work there. You're like, is this any good? Have you seen this? Maybe it's showing. You're like, oh, what's that? That looks interesting. I'll just try that out. And so, or you have like the suggested things. So it just felt more personal. It felt more like a I don't know, communal thing to do. It was a cool thing.
It was. I genuinely miss those days for the exact point you just said. More times than not, if I find myself falling into the stream service rabbit hole of scrolling through all these titles, chances are I end up not watching any of them. And I will go to the movies I own and put one of those in. Or I'll just be like, fine, I guess I'm not watching anything. There's something like, unlike where when I was younger, when rental stores existed, you were excited to go. You knew you were leaving with at least a couple movies every time, even when you were unsure of what you wanted to watch. You just knew, I'm going to walk those aisles, and one of them is actually going to like pop out at me. There was something fun about that. You knew you were going to get entertained that night. It felt good. It was fun going home with those movies and being like, oh man, I can't wait to watch this. This is so awesome. Especially the new releases that you didn't get to see in the theater. You're like driving home like, oh my God, I finally get to watch this. It's going to be great, you know?
And I also think I think like the value of the movies was higher because of scarcity. Like, to put it in economic terms, you rented this movie and you had it for 3 days, 5 days, maybe.
Depending on the rental. New releases were usually like a one-night rental, or you could rent it for a couple.
And so you had it for a limited time. And mostly for me as a kid, you aren't watching new releases. You're watching old stuff that you're like, oh, this looks like a hilarious little comedy that nobody's ever heard of, and it sucks. But for you, it's funny because you've never seen it before. And so you rent it, and you have it for 5 days. And you watch that movie over and over and over because you know you have to take it back soon, and it might be you're not going to see Caddyshack again for years because it's just not available. Your parents don't own it; they're never going to own it. They don't like it, but you want to watch it, so you watch it constantly, and then you take it back, and it's gone. And so then you replay it in your mind. You say it with your friends, like you try to hold on to it, but you don't have that now. Now everything's constantly available. I can watch anything I want at any time. And it's like, it loses its value kind of in a way.
I don't even like worry about, am I going to be able to find this one for like movies that we're watching? I genuinely don't get concerned about having to find a movie that I might not own. I'm like, well, I'll just pull this up and scroll through all the streaming services real quick and find it. And in less than 5 minutes, I have the title. It's kind of a bummer. It's
a blessing. It's a blessing and a curse. Like, obviously, it's super convenient to be like, "Hey, do you want to watch a crazy movie together?" And we can both find it immediately.
Yeah, it's that convenience trope again. It's all about we have put more investment into convenience than the value or like the experience. Kind of a bummer. Yeah. I always get a little heartbroken knowing that I don't get to like take my child to the video rental store on a weekend night to pick something out, Yeah, we can scroll all we want or pick a movie from home. But there really was something about getting in the car and going to the video store. There was something about it. It was so much fun doing that. I genuinely miss that so much.
You got to go to Bend, Oregon to go to the last Blockbuster in existence. I don't know how much longer they'll hold out.
There was one that I watched this week. I did not know it existed until this week, but we'll stick on the nostalgia train for a quick minute.
Okay.
Growing up in the 90s, Nickelodeon was like, that is staple childhood. That is man, I still get, I mean, I've got my Rocco and Angry Beaver Funko Pops hanging over one of the doors at my place.
Nice.
Nickelodeon has always meant a lot to me, and Hulu has this fantastic documentary called The Orange Years. It's the beginning or the Nickelodeon story. It's got interviews with everyone that created Nickelodeon. It's got interviews with a bunch of like old cast members. So they talk about all that. They talk about like when Rocco got created, Doug, Rugrats, etc. I was so elated watching that documentary. It was the best kind of nostalgia. It's why I love all of my Funko collectibles. It's not that you live in the past. It's that it's a celebration of what kind of has shaped you. And this documentary really felt that way to me, where it was like, oh my God, I remember like watching that cartoon when it started. I remember watching that promo the first time they aired it. I remember the game shows and wanting to be on Double Dare, wanting to be on Legends of the Hidden Temple, you know, like
dude, Legends of the Hidden Temple is one of those shows that I'm like, I would still love to be on Legends of the Hidden Temple.
I would totally do it.
I kind of want like some memorabilia from that show or Guts. Like I've been on eBay
Guts
before,
was
and
fantastic.
I'm like, I really want to get one of those like aggro crag trophies that they got at the end of Guts. I'm like, I just want one. I never competed, but I want one.
It was a lot of fun watching kind of the thought process to the creation of this whole network and the decision making that went into everything was all children are first. They didn't approach anything with an adult mentality. They approached everything with, what do kids want? Like, what's going on in a kid's mind? We don't know. We're grown-ups. We're boring. We're stuck in routines. Children know what's up. That's why on like Double Dare, they have games where kids are reaching up into the nose and like in all the slime and crap and pulling out a flag. That's why it's gross. It's hilarious. Yeah. Oh man. I always wished, I think every kid wanted, I always wanted to get slimed on Nickel.
Slimed is like the peak.
That was highest honor of childhood. If you got slimed, it was amazing. And unfortunately, living in Colorado, Nickelodeon was never coming to Colorado. And my parents were like, we are not taking you to Florida to go to Nickelodeon Studios. It's just not in the cards. Fine. But that document, man, if you want a jumpstart on the nostalgia, just celebrate that part of life. Orange Years. That was such a fun one to watch. Oh man, couldn't help but smile for so long after I watched that. Documentaries do such a great job of invoking so much emotion, no matter what your emotion is. And I am highly receptive of that. For like, my emotions will get triggered pretty easily. Maybe that's why my daughter doesn't like a lot of like the human style. She wanted me to, or did you want to do it? Did you want to make a cameo? Nope. Oh, she's like hiding behind the phone. But my daughter wanted me to show this.
Oh,
this is her note,
pretty.
Her contribution to our episode. It's I like animal documentaries. And it's, what is that? I like animals with a little love heart. Oh. And she made an alias of the masked cat. But we're still I'm going to keep calling her just like the adorably fierce little turd. Collective. Aww.
Aww.
Hey, can you do me a favor? Okay. I, unlike my child, don't really watch a lot of animal documentaries.
Yeah.
Although I did watch a ton of Animal Planet when I was her age, which is essentially a whole network of animal documentaries. So that's my cheat. Anything with a crocodile hunter, man.
Yeah, it's true.
R.I.P. Steve.
Yeah, I've never seen March of the Penguins, but it's like the second or third highest grossing documentary of all time.
Yeah,
People
I've seen
loved
it.
that.
Yeah, it was interesting watching
Okay.
that kind of migration of penguins. You never really take into account of that. But yeah, I don't watch a whole lot of animal ones. Does Tiger King count as an animal documentary?
It certainly does. It's he himself is an animal. Yeah, we live in a post-Tiger King era. You can't talk about anything after 2020 without talking about Tiger King. That's like one of the things, like a month after first watching it, I was like, we need to watch it again because it's such a crazy thing.
I remember being so apprehensive of watching it because I was like, I'm not going to watch a documentary that is all about animal abuse. I don't want to watch tigers get abused and beat, you know?
Right.
And then I had an old coworker watch it, and he's from Oklahoma. So he remembers all the media about this dude.
Mm.
And he told me, he's like, man, you have to watch this. And I was like, I told him the same thing. You know, I don't have it in me to be able to stomach watching tigers get like horribly abused. And he was like, it's not exactly what you think. It's not like, yes, there's animal abuse, but it's not the abuse that you're used to seeing. And that's not what the actual series focuses on or even watches.
Yeah, it doesn't even really show it. It kind of mentions maybe they're mistreated in these ways, but it's mostly just about this eccentric personality and his shenanigans, I guess.
Before going to work, I was like, all right. And that's what I was working in the evenings when I watched this. I was like, all right, I'll watch one episode. What was it, 7 episodes? I was like, I'm just going to watch one.
Yeah.
And then I finished the whole series. And
yeah, it sucks you in.
And every episode I was like, this is the last one. And then it would end on a spot that I'd be like, what? How can that? What? How do you like move from this moment? What? Like just so bewilderment. And when it ended, I was still just so, how do these people actually exist? And this is a great one where the guy who made the documentary set out with the intent to make something completely different. It was like for a reality show, and just realized very early on, I need to document everything going on because you can't make this up. This is like real life, worst B movie, taking itself serious, Hollywood, right? Like this is, Ed Wood could not make something this bad on purpose. It was so glorious.
Yeah, I love when he he's like introduces Carol Baskins as like this relatively normal character, and then one of the episodes ends and it's like, and it seems like she may be being investigated for killing her husband or something.
And
we don't know what's happening.
Feeding him to the tigers, like
yeah.
What?
Tune in next episode to see what the fuck is going on now.
Wait, because the first episode when you meet her, that very first one, you're like, oh, she seems like I might be able to get behind her. Like she seems okay in that very first episode.
She obviously cares about the tigers and is trying to shut him down. And this guy's an asshole. Yeah, I'm totally on her side. And then you get into it and you're like,
episode 2 shows up. They're like,
same as him.
Yeah, they're like, she's under investigation for feeding her husband to a tiger. How did she do it? And then you get songs from the Tiger King. I can't remember his name. It's slipping my mind. But I was like, and then you get wannabe Vegas gangsters, but they're not. They're just sad, like white trash, horrible human beings. And you're like, this show is the most absurd thing I've ever witnessed in my life. To this day. I still am so stunned that these people are real.
Yeah. Yeah, Tiger King. I also appreciate how huge of like a cultural impact it had immediately. That was my favorite part of 2020 and like the whole quarantine thing. It's like, well, Tiger King's on. Let's watch that. And oh shit, this is crazy. Everybody, let's talk about it. That was the best.
Just, what? On a sad related note, it turns out they are moving forward with the miniseries about the dude. What the hell is his name?
Like fictional miniseries?
I don't know. A Hollywood version of it, we'll say.
Oh, okay.
Which
I'm sure that won't be as good.
Right. I kind of feel like how are you going to make, whether it's a miniseries or even a movie based on this guy's life, that will be any more ridiculous than what we have witnessed? And what we witnessed happens to be real, happens to have actually happened. What are you going to do? You can't make anything up. You can't.
That's the best version of the story, is that this is all real. There's no suspension of disbelief. Yeah.
But sadly,
Joe
Exotic. Thank you. I knew it was something dumb.
Yeah.
Sadly, Nicolas Cage.
I was like, how can you forget that?
Sadly, Nicolas Cage is no longer attached with the project to play Joe Exotic. That kind of bums me out.
I was going to say, I wasn't interested at all. I totally agreed with you that they shouldn't make it. And then you said the name Nicolas Cage. And I was like, okay, maybe they should make it. That would be good. I would see that.
But now he's not attached to it. And now I'm back to like, I don't think I'll watch it.
Yeah. Well, that's a bummer.
So, God, we've gone over so many. The kind that I tend to gravitate towards, just real kind of the last one, the main one that I go towards will always be creative arts, but they tend to be music driven or very like kind of personal to me. So like a huge fan of music documentaries. I'm in the rare group that actually loves Metallica as some kind of monster. Talking to my daughter about that. I really respect their vulnerability during that time. That it shows a ton of like, you guys are really open about a lot of stuff that celebrities would actively try to not be open about, try to hide.
Yeah.
There's one, I think people have kind of forgotten about it, but they should not and go watch it, especially if you're a fan of his. But Conan O'Brien Can't Stop. Did you ever watch that one? After he got fired from NBC and in his like conditions or whatever, when he wasn't allowed back on TV for like a year or whatever it was, he went and toured the country with this stand-up / musical act. So the documentary of
I remember seeing maybe a trailer or something for it. Yeah, I did like a live show that was basically the show, just no cameras.
Right. And you got to see the side of him where, and he's pretty open about it, his obsession with working and obsession with pleasing everyone around him. And you get to see some pretty vulnerable moments with him, which it made me a bigger fan of his after watching that documentary. And I'm a huge Conan fan.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the nostalgia kick, there is one that, as a Calvin and Hobbes fan, if you have not watched this one, you're doing yourself a disservice. You need to find it. It's called Dear Mr. Watterson. Did you ever hear of this one?
Okay. No, I didn't even know it existed.
It is a whole documentary about Bill Watterson, the guy that created Calvin and Hobbes, the comic strip. It goes through everything, how he approached the comic, his decision to retire, the final strip. And the biggest piece to me that I'm always like just kind of blown away by, his absolute refusal to merchandise Calvin and Hobbes. So every a lot of people don't realize this, but every Calvin bumper sticker that you see of him like peeing on whatever logo or bumper stickers in general of Calvin and Hobbes, anything Calvin and Hobbes you see out in the world that is not in the comic strips or the books, the collected works, it's technically copyright infringement. Like it's
not
these images should unlicensed. Not exist. Yeah. It kind of blew me away. I never realized that until I watched this one, but check that out. Calvin and Hobbes is such a huge part of my childhood and life that I love that one. I don't know if it's still on any of the streaming services. Should be, but
I'll have to check it out. Yeah, I'm a big fan. I think that's really interesting.
But stuff like that. Music ones really connect with me a lot. There's a cool one about a recording studio. It's called Muscle Shoals. That one, if you just want to hear musicians talk about kind of the recording process when you're in a good mind state, that one's infectious. Love that one. Being a metalhead, there's a fun one. It gets so close to hitting the mark and being so great, but it kind of falters a little bit, but it's still good enough to mention. It's called Metal: A Headbanger's Journey. Check that one out. It's a lot of fun.
That sounds really fun. There's a couple that I certainly like that I'll shout out to that speak to my interests. So everybody who's been a long time listener to the podcast know how big of a fan I am of jacked dudes. And if you as well are interested in jacked dudes, there's a really interesting one that I wouldn't expect to be interesting, but it is called Bigger, Faster, Stronger, or Bigger, Stronger, Faster, I think technically is what it's called. And it's all about kind of these random people who are like all taking steroids and stuff. It's kind of about steroids, but it's really interesting. In the similar vein, same vein, there's Pumping Iron, which is like early days Arnold Schwarzenegger and Lou Ferrigno, I believe, is in it a lot too. And it's just about like their bodybuilding careers.
Yeah.
And it's for someone who's never really been interested in like bodybuilding, it's a really interesting look at the dedication, the exact science, the body dysmorphia. Like this covers a long list of things, and to see young Arnold as like this untouchable king as Lou Ferrigno tries to like catch him, it's really interesting.
Yeah, Pumping Iron, that's a crazy famous documentary.
Yeah.
Like really famous documentary. So one thing, I'm sure people have kind of concluded this, are I don't want to say fandom. That feels wrong to say. There's like no good way to put this, but serial killers tend to be a topic that we are like, we enjoy learning about, not out of like, oh, this is fun, but more of like, this is really interesting and whatever. Did you?
It's not weird anymore because true crime
everyone
is like
seems
this huge
to do
thing that. Yeah, everyone listens to a true crime podcast. It's not weird.
Oh my God. Remember at the whole start, right before we recorded, I was like, there was something else I was going to tell you, but I can't remember. You just made me remember. Hey, it's not a documentary.
Fantastic.
But I know you're a huge Steve Martin and Martin Short fan.
Hey, yeah, I was going to mention that too. We started watching that show.
Thank you for starting to watch that show. On Hulu, go watch Only Murders in the Building. It is hilarious.
Yeah. Steve Martin and Martin Short, we went and saw them at Red Rocks together a couple of years ago, and they're hilarious, obviously, in everything. But to see them in a new show now, it's just like amazing. It's so fun.
It's such a great, like, it makes fun of true crime fans in the best kind of way.
Yeah. I was going to bring it up to you because they like try to start a podcast about this murder in their building. And it made me think of like managing a podcast and trying to start it and all the things we've had to go through. And it's like, this is hilarious.
It's so just a fun little segue. Yeah. You triggered it when you were like true crime podcast, like, bing. You gotta watch Only Murders in the Building. I'm so glad you started watching it. I do like that it is a weekly episode. There's something really special about that to me. Yes.
I feel like we as society have moved on from weekly episodic content. That's old TV style. Nobody cares about old TV anymore.
But it's so much.
Now I'm going to be the
better.
opposite of what I said. I'm the opposite of what I said about Blockbuster. We're in a new era with instant content where you drop all the episodes immediately, and I need to binge it. That's my. I'm a walking hypocrisy.
Yep. No, I really like when in the second episode, because they released the first 2 episodes together. I was like, oh man. And then it ended and it was like, new episodes on Tuesdays. I was like, we're going back to it. Now, at the same time, being someone who gets easily distracted, obviously.
Yeah.
I was like, how well am I going to be able to keep up on this?
Yeah. It's not like must-see TV where you have to tune in Tuesday or you'll miss it.
Yeah. So there's a chance I will be able to still binge it because I'll forget to watch a few episodes and then get to watch those binge time. Anyways, there's some interesting ones on the subject of like documentaries that start one way and go a completely different direction. Whether you're a fan of like metal music or the band Lamb of God or not, they happen to be one of my all-time favorites. They have a documentary that they made a few years ago. It's called As the Palaces Burn. When they started making this documentary, it was supposed to be kind of a celebration of the fans, not just of the band, but like metal music, hardcore, punk, all that, the fandom of it and the impact the music has on their lives. And it ended up being a documentary about the time the lead vocalist, Randy Bly, was accused of manslaughter in the Czech Republic and was arrested. So it ends up being a documentary about that whole experience and kind of what the band and the fans and the music scene kind of went through during that time period. It was very interesting. It was all over like major media news. It was crazy. Whether you're a fan of that music or that band or not, I highly recommend this one because it hits differently than what you would expect. It's a very raw, very real, very heartbreaking documentary at times. And then at the same time, it's super inspiring. It's you got to see it. It's so well done. I love that one. I was watching it earlier. It ended now.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't watched music documentaries in a long time. I remember seeing a few a long time ago. The one that sticks out in my mind, there was an Under Oath documentary about, I don't even remember which album it was released on, but it's always fun to like kind of see them on tour and in these different places, and the different things that happen to them can be very interesting. And then if you throw in something like murder accusation, that certainly heightens the situation.
Right. And then back to segue before I went down like a whole different pathway. We were talking serial killers. You watch Conversations with a Killer, right? The Ted Bundy tapes on Netflix. Did you ever watch that one?
I don't think so.
Oh, buddy. Oh my
Christy
God.
Might have.
I'm pretty positive Christy had to have. If you like true crime, obviously Ted Bundy was such a horrific part of modern America history. The Ted Bundy tapes is really interesting because it was this guy who got to interview Ted Bundy like right before he was executed. And the whole documentary is the guy talking about what it was like interviewing him, and then you listen to the actual tapes.
Okay.
Hearing Ted Bundy actually talk about the crimes or his innocence.
Yeah.
So many quotes on
Dustin's
that.
Doing air quotes for those of you who can't see.
Very interesting. Gives you a really kind of frightening perspective into the mentality of a serial killer, especially one like Ted Bundy. Check that one out. You feel uncomfortable, but that one, I know being true crime fans, and I know your wife, and I definitely, probably more so than is healthy, got caught up in like the serial killer mania. Like, we just want to learn all about them, all of them. And then you feel
all the
gross
podcasts,
because it turns out that a lot of it kind of wears on you.
It's a little disturbing, to say the least. Yeah, that sounds interesting, though, because I'm a massive fan of Mindhunter, the Netflix series, David Fincher series. And it sounds kind of like that, just less dramatic, probably.
Right. Yeah, not quite as dramatized, because it's the actual dude actually talking. But documentaries, one thing, binge watching nothing but documentaries this last week that kind of struck me, and I watched some really horrible ones. Like, I saw one on H.H. Holmes, and I was really excited to watch that one because he's probably the most intriguing killer in American history to me. Just that whole time period with like in Chicago during the World Fair, the castle,
right.
This documentary, and I have learned a lot about H.H. Holmes, probably more so than is healthy. Like, I've got books on the dude. Every true crime podcast
for sure.
he is or was, not just like the horrific acts that he committed, but everything leading up to it, where he was like basically the inventor of insurance fraud, crazy stuff like that.
Since you've researched so much, do you buy into the theory that he was Jack the Ripper who had escaped from England?
It fits really, really well. The unfortunate thing about that, though, is that it fits really, really well. It seems very coincidental.
Too obvious.
Convenient.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're probably not going to be able to prove that he was or wasn't. It'll just be one of those favorite theories. Although it feels very convenient and very coincidental, I gotta say it still ends up making sense at the end of the day. Like, when one of his aliases is still being used in that district of London at that time, every time a body was found, not everyone knew his aliases. Like, come on. It's like, his handwriting is in those ledgers of like the places that he stayed. He was gone from Chicago during the killings in London. He would like it all fits really well. So I would not be shocked. I like the idea. I think it adds more terror to him. So
makes the legend bigger. Yeah,
it does. So I don't know if I actually buy it, but it's definitely a fun one to be like, and there's a chance. So that's kind of where I stand. I just leave it at there being a chance that he was. But I tried to watch one on him, and it was like one of the worst documentaries I've ever watched. And this was a clear thing of what makes a good documentary good and a bad one really bad. Patience. So good documentaries, they stick with things. They dive into the nitty gritty. They don't shy away from a lot of it, and they don't try to do too much dramatization. They really try to just let the reality of the subject be the reality. This one that I tried watching, the filmmaker cast him and his like friends. It seemed like a bad middle school homemade video.
Okay.
And then on top of that, the first like 10 facts that he tried to lay down about H.H. Holmes were wrong. And that's a big turnoff to a documentary.
Yeah. Yeah.
It got to the point where I was like, all right, I'm done with this one. Turn that off. And then I was really excited to watch this other one about Skinwalker Ranch, which is this like super famous hotspot for paranormal activity, UFO sightings. They claim that they're shapeshifters, i.e. werewolves, or at least as
I
close
watched a
to
Ghost
werewolf.
Adventures episode about that.
Ooh, Ghost Adventures.
I actually honestly love Ghost Adventures.
I'm not shocked.
Not even ironically. I think it's amazing and so fun.
I've watched a handful because they've been playing a lot of their stuff recently, and I'm like, these guys are they're dramatic.
Don't talk bad about them.
Very dramatic. Don't talk bad about them. Anyways,
great.
I was really excited for the Skinwalker documentary because I was like, it'll be fun to watch, like the witness testimonies, the videos that people have taken from there, hear their stories, and then also hear the legends of the Skinwalker from like the tribes that used to be there. I was really excited for that. Yeah. It was so boring, and it never really did anything that like you haven't already seen or heard, and I was really bummed about that. They didn't do any focus on like the actual like mythology of the Skinwalker. It was a quick blip. It was all alien sightings, but just the way he went about it was just like, God damn it.
Yeah.
Like, I was taken out of the documentary, and it was one of the longer ones I watched too, which sucked, but I was bummed about that because all the stuff around Skinwalker Ranch is actually kind of fascinating. As someone who's on the fence with all things supernatural or paranormal, Skinwalker Ranch is definitely one that you're like, this one, there's a lot to this one. there's some interesting things here.
Yeah. Especially when like part of you wants to believe, like you're open to the idea that there are aliens or werewolves or something weird going on. Like I would love to see any sort of even circumstantial evidence about that. Just please show me. And then to not get that. That's certainly frustrating.
I mean, you get the stories and stuff. It was just the way that this guy went about making it. It felt off to me. But like, okay, you brought up Ghost Adventures. Have you watched their very first, like, it was an actual documentary?
I've seen every episode.
Okay, so, well, this wasn't an episode.
I haven't seen the movie.
Okay, so they had a movie. It was a documentary. I forget where they investigated. But to this day,
it was the Old Watch Show Club, I believe.
Yeah, so in terms of, like, ghost sightings or activity, paranormal activity on camera, the Ghost Adventure guys are known for having one of the best pieces of evidence for it. And it's from that documentary. I used to have the documentary. I don't anymore. I was kind of bummed that I didn't have it because I was like, oh, I'll watch that one again. And then I was like, I don't have it anymore. Oh, well.
Yeah.
And then I watched their show instead. But there's some stuff of theirs, man, where I'm like, that is intriguing.
Mm-hmm.
But then I think all the times that I've watched so many debunking things when it comes to paranormal videos, I may have watched too many of those because there's several moments in some of their episodes where I'm like, come on. Like, that's obviously staged. And your whole shtick is, it's just us three. There's no one around in this lockdown. And you're like, that was staged.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that I don't say a lot of it looks like it is staged, but certainly a lot of it easily could be staged, not just through the magic of editing for a TV show, but even just having somebody over there pushing that thing or throwing this, like closing the door or whatever. It's like, there's such small, simple things. It's pretty simple to imagine a faking of it. Yeah. So you can't put a lot of stock into it for sure, but it's fun to imagine.
They're always like, you don't want to, like, you got to be safe and you got to be careful when in these environments. And then the first thing they do is like, I'm calling you out. Come on. Come punch me. Come do anything. You're like, okay. They're like, this place is said to be the gateway to hell. Hey, you demons, I'm here. Come and mess with me. You're like, even as a skeptic, I know not to do that crap. What are you doing?
Right. Yeah, it's pretty funny. You talking about the movie that kicked off the show for Ghost Adventures reminded me, though, of I forgot I had seen this documentary, but have you seen the Catfish documentary that was made before the MTV show?
Yeah, I did. I remember watching that and feeling kind of gross about it.
I saw it way before I even knew what catfishing was or what the show hadn't come out yet. And it was a very interesting look into, I can't believe people did this. I can't believe he got tricked into this. I can't believe you couldn't tell that this was a woman who was somebody totally different than who she said she was on the internet. But I think that kind of thing is especially important for young people to see, because you live in a very online world now.
I haven't watched any of the show. I was kind of shocked they made a show about it, and that almost felt a little discrediting to the point of his documentary. I don't know if he's involved in it or not. I probably still won't watch the
hosts
show.
it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He's hosted it for like several seasons. And
okay.
it's interesting in the sense that they go and they help people who feel like they might be getting catfished. They help them find the real person. Then they like confront the person and ask them why they're doing it and where'd you get these pictures and all this stuff. So it's kind of an investigation type show.
All right.
But it's interesting.
See, I was worried that it was going to be like kind of fictionalizing the events from the movie, kind of trying to turn that into like a thing. But if it's them calling people out, I'm more for that than...
Yeah. It's more like, this happened to me, and then all these people are writing me that they think it might be happening to them, so I'm going to help them try to figure out if it's happening to them. But I do think a lot of people actively try to catfish people just for like the publicity of it and the notoriety of
it. Kind of jacked up. Don't do that.
Yeah. You're kind of creating your own problem.
Don't be a piece of crap like that. But yes, I do think the movie is important for younger people to watch, because the internet is kind of a not great place.
Yeah, it's a scary place, especially to have to grow up there. One of the last ones I wanted to be sure to shout out, and then you kind of mentioned something similar with the terrible documentary you watched. You said it was super boring. I watched a documentary about a pretty boring subject, but it was made in such an interesting way and one of the most beautiful documentaries I've ever seen. So there's a documentary called Neat, The Story of Bourbon, and it's all about making American whiskey in America, and which on the surface is an extremely boring subject, because you take these grains and you throw them in the vat and you let them sit for 7 years in a barrel. And then 7 years later, you get to have some alcohol, and it's not very exciting. But the way it's filmed is like incredibly beautiful. And it's like kind of soothing, and it makes you want whiskey, obviously, because it looks delicious. Everything about it seems peaceful and nice and calm, and it's very relaxing, I think, to watch it.
Hey, there's nothing wrong.
But it's also, if you like history, I think it's also interesting that the history of alcohol is interesting, not just in America, where we had the I almost said recession, but the other thing that happened before the Great Depression, or around the Great Depression, Prohibition. Thank you. But around the world, there have been various places and various times where they've had Prohibition. That when we went to Ireland, we had a distillery tour, and they talked about Irish whiskey making, and they had like almost completely lost all their whiskey like heritage and making and stuff because of Prohibition. And it was right after that, like America stopped doing it, so they couldn't export it. So it just became a whole thing. But Neat is a really interesting documentary just because it shows the whole process of making it. You really start to appreciate what a single bottle or a single glass, what it takes to put into that, because it's not just all these ingredients that people found and sourced and put together, but then they had to like sculpt it and store it, and it's a very difficult business to get into, because you have to wait at least 7 years before you have any sort of product to sell. So it's just a crazy story about people who are passionate about this stuff, and I think those kinds of things are interesting.
Yeah. No, I saw that one and I was like, ooh, I bet that's interesting, because I like that kind of stuff sometimes. I would imagine that one would be soothing.
Yeah.
One last one that I'll bring up because I can't help but bring it up. I became obsessed with this miniseries, as did like The World. But if you haven't gotten around to watching The Last Dance, the whole 10-part miniseries about Michael Jordan and the Bulls, you need to. I'm not even a basketball fan, but that documentary might be the greatest documentary I've ever watched, even though it's 10 hours. It's so well made because they've been making it since the start of Michael Jordan's career, which is the craziest part, that these guys have just constantly been like, we're just documenting. We don't know what we're going to turn it into, but we're just documenting. And we got The Last Dance. It's so well done. It does everything a documentary should do, where it presents the subject and then completely dissects it and disassembles everything so that you understand all the good, all the bad that is a part of this thing. And then it gives you some very inspiring moments, and it gives you some moments where you're like, wow, Michael Jordan does not necessarily come across as like the greatest dude in sports or in general.
Yeah.
Like he's
not a perfect hero.
Asshole. Yeah.
Yeah.
But oh my God, I remember watching it on a whim and just being so engulfed by it and just being like, I can't help but watch all of this. This is amazing to me. So if you haven't gotten around to it, it's on Netflix. It is 10 episodes, but you'll watch it real fast. At least I did. It's so well done. So well done.
Yeah. I've been meaning to. I still haven't seen it, and I really wanted to for this episode, but because it's 10 episodes in 10 hours, I was like, it's either this or all the other stuff I want to talk about, and I can't do both.
I debated rewatching it, and I was like, do I watch this, which is 10 hours, or do I save that 10 hours to watch a couple new documentaries? It's like, I should probably watch a couple new documentaries. All right. Yeah. Like, that's just...
No, I've heard amazing things, though.
It really is good.
I really want to.
All the hype, usually something might get a little overhyped, but there's something very special about The Last Dance. It deserves all the hype, all the accolades. It's so good.
Yeah.
So well.
Good.
Documentaries, man. It's such an interesting subject.
I agree. I think that you made a good point there, that there's good examples of all the best ways to do it. And if you're a documentary filmmaker and you're interested in getting into it, there are certainly good ways to do it and bad ways to do it. And so hopefully you can take away from that what it is.
You looked like you were going to say something earlier, and then I interrupted you like the horrible co-host that I
I don't think so. At least not that I can recall.
All right. Well, then I take back.
I can't recall in this case.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's probably a good place to call it. That's probably all of the documentaries worth talking about. Yeah, and there's there are countless documentaries. It's kind of overwhelming how many documentaries over every subject there actually is. Yeah.
So, I mean, you kind of have your pick. Just it's crazy.
Yeah, whatever you're interested in, you can definitely narrow it down. If you're interested in video games, if you're interested in whatever, there's documentaries about it, and it's probably really fascinating.
Yeah. And there's still a handful that I wanted to watch. Just didn't get around to it, but definitely intend to.
Are you dying?
Right. Apparently.
Don't. I'll send help.
Oh, gee, thanks.
Someone to give you the.
I would ask my daughter for like some more water or something, but she nope.
Yeah, crack the whip.
Sure. Kyle, get off your butt. Nothing.
No respect.
No respect. I get no respect. We're doing a bit from an old comedian. Yeah, she won't care.
She doesn't know who Rodney Dangerfield is. Yeah.
She doesn't like old people stuff. Now, let me clarify. To an 11-year-old, old people stuff means anyone over the age of 15 is old people, and our stuff sucks.
Yeah. I think it's cool, but maybe I'm old.
She's full of crap. She does like older stuff.
Yeah.
Not all of it. She's just trying to put on a front right now. I'm an angsty, cool 11-year-old.
I'm Gen Z.
To the point in the show where Jake and I make fun of you. You want to be on camera? I'll turn the camera. Oh. Excuse me. See, that's what I needed to do. Don't shoot me on camera. She's got a Nerf gun, not a real gun.
I wasn't at all concerned about it being a real gun.
Well, I'm just... Yep.
Putting it out there.
Yeah, just full disclosure.
Yeah.
So tell us your favorite documentaries, which ones have impacted you, if you've watched any of the ones that we've mentioned.
Yeah.
Which ones
you
didn't
can find us
like?
on Facebook and Instagram. Definitely want to know which ones, if we've missed any that you think are great, I would like to see them. Let us know. Yeah. Or if you see any that we should avoid that you hated, let us know those too so we don't waste our time.
Yeah. So that's our documentaries. I can't really think of anything else to really bookend, right?
Say?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think that's about it. So yeah, thanks for
Thank you, everyone.
Everybody. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram, and we'll see you later.
We should say we are taking a week off because Jake is going to Alaska.
Oh, yeah. That's true.
So there will be 1 week without a new episode, but then we're coming back with we're doing our top 10. Is that what we're doing?
Yes.
Okay,
correct.
Another top 10 episode of black and white films. So, and just kind of what makes them special and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of black and white. Why are you showing me 2 packs of bubble gum? I didn't know it was my responsibility to keep track of your gross gum. So we'll be coming back with our top 10 black and white films. That should be interesting to do. I think there's going to be...
I'm excited to talk about
all of them. Or at least the ones that we like the most. I imagine yours are probably going to be... I think I'll have a good mix of decades. Actually, I don't know if I can because I've already mentioned a handful of black and whites in previous episodes. So I find myself at kind of a... I don't want to pull an Adam Sandler mistake or a Happy Gilmore mistake again and mention the same movie several episodes. By the way, did I ever tell you my daughter watched Happy Gilmore and she loved it and she thought it was hilarious? That's all I got to say.
As she would. That's a pretty old movie.
Yeah, that's an old person movie.
I'm excited to... It's a very old person movie. I'm excited to talk about not just old black and white movies, obviously, but also new ones. And people are still making black and white ones. One of the best picture nominations from this last year was black and white. So just the style and what it lends to filmmaking, I think is interesting. Yeah. So we'll have a lot to say in 2 weeks.
So dive into some black and white filmmaking because it definitely adds a different feel to a film. So yeah, and check out some of the documentaries from this episode that you may have missed. In the meantime, we have a little 1 week break. Yeah. So enjoy, everyone.
All right, talk to you next time.
Bye-bye.